Okay, hi everybody. We're going to officially begin. Welcome to the webinar on Musar Topic 5, Equanimity, Minusat Nefesh. And I think it's a really great topic. I know personally, I was just complaining about my health, and it's very nice to have some equanimity and try to be even keeled. So to start, so I'm going to go to the agenda. And we have some really interesting stuff on here I'm excited about. The first item is our Israel trip opportunity. You should have received an email telling you about the Chai Mitzvah initiative to encourage our Chai Mitzvah teams to go to Israel. Did everybody receive the email?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Chai Mitzvah is offering a grant of $2,000 for each student, limited to the first 125 who apply. To go to Israel. The parameters of the grant are in the email I sent. Basically, it can be combined with any other money that they have. It can be for just about any peer trip, as long as they're in Israel for 3 Shabbatot. That's the deal. So in the email, there are some trips that are recommended, but it's perfectly fine if your students have another trip they're interested in.
That's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing.
It really is. It's so exciting. I'm thrilled. Hi. I'm going to cough. Okay, I'm good. I was just telling everyone I'm recovering from whooping cough. I don't even know how to say it. I feel like Stewie in you know what I'm talking about? Cool Whip? Right.
Yes, my daughter says it all the time. She makes fun of him.
Anyway, but I am good now, and I'm grateful, and this is very exciting. So I think this is pretty much the time when students are beginning to firm up their summer plans. So it's probably a good time to let everybody know about it. I sent you an email. I also sent a flyer that I hope everybody received. You can share it by email. You can put it up on a bulletin board. However you get it out, however you communicate with your families, just let them know. We've had some applications so far, and I think it's an exciting opportunity. I know some of the students are younger and probably wouldn't take advantage as much because it's a long trip, but it is pretty exciting. So I hope that a lot of people will be able to take advantage of it. There's no age limit. It's just that usually younger kids don't go to Israel for that one. So that's exciting. Then another exciting thing you see on the agenda are our new wrap materials. So this is another exciting initiative. I don't know if you've heard of Matt Barr of Bible Wraps.
No.
He was a Hebrew school teacher. He's a youngish guy. Hebrew school teacher who used to do wraps for his class because they liked it. And it's become what he does. You can go to his website. I'll send a link out later, and you can see what his work is like. It's a cool, fun way for teens to learn. He does workshops, but we're going to do a curriculum that the educators can use. Mm-hmm. It's going to complement our existing materials really nicely. We just made a short video about it that was in the last Chai Mitzvah newsletter. But I think you really should go to his website and look at his work because it's really cool. You can learn more about it. So I think it's going to be pretty cool. Okay. And then, of course, the next thing on the agenda. Oh, and if any questions, let me know. The next thing is, of course, Facebook. I always remind you guys to share interesting things. Jennifer Walensky-Saber put photos of her teen studying the Chavruta, which was very nice. And Ellen, thank you for your post. Your kids are always doing interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, they are, but they're still being very difficult.
You're 7th graders. That's like...
Yeah, I just had a talk with the director a few minutes ago. We're kind of, they just can't go deep. They just can't go deep. So.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That you reach them at the level that works for them,
Trying. Yeah.
And you do the best you can. But when I see what you're doing, you're doing good stuff.
Yeah, we're doing good stuff.
You are. I feel like seeing what you do. I feel like like they're all getting something out of it, and I think
that's what we're thinking. We're hoping and praying.
I think they are, and I think that doing these topics is good for them. And,
yeah.
And the other thing about teens, however old they are, they don't always let you know that you've reached them. It would be kind of like, you know, they're more like a cat. Like I'm meant to do that, you know. So you know, it's something to keep in mind also.
Yeah.
But I think it looks when I see your photos, they look like they're actually
Yeah. At that moment, we're taking a picture. So.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And so, but this also reminded me that we are planning for the spring a Chai Mitzvah Day. So I'm going to send out a doodle poll. The idea is that you do your projects in your local areas, and we'll have a hashtag on Instagram that we can share. And I just want to find out, do any of you have mitzvah days planned?
Yes, they do at the temple I'm teaching at. They have, I think it's May 6th. They have one.
We just had ours last week on Martin Luther King's, that Sunday we had ours.
That's nice. Wow.
So the question is, do you want to do something else later on, or do you want to use, I mean, you may have stuff going on anyway, that usually people have stuff going on in the synagogue.
We stuff have going on, and the kids in my class, they're pre and post and bar bat mitzvah, that age group. So they have their own projects, plus what we're doing as a class, and then as a temple, I suppose we'll be doing stuff. So it's like we have a lot of stuff going on. So I don't know,
I think many places do. I think that's
it's pretty common these days.
So the idea is, because I know a lot of places do it in the spring. Anybody else want to chime in if you have anything planned or when you know your mitzvah day is going to be?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to do something. We can't expect everybody to do it on the same day, but we can have an Instagram hashtag where we can all post our stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be nice to see what other people are doing and and then share. So, so if anybody has anything they want to say about that before we get to our topic, I would be very happy to hear it. Okay. Sounds like everyone's good. Okay. So let's go to our next slide. Let's start our themes. This is a really interesting topic. The word equanimity comes from a Latin word, which I probably am not going to pronounce properly, equanimitas. Equus means even, and animus means soul or mind. So we know that Judaism isn't the only religion that values your ability to remain composed, even when you're exposed to distress. It's part of the Hindu yoga tradition, and we'll do a little yoga with this midah. It's it's byproduct of Buddhist meditation. It was a central concept of the Stoic ethics of the ancient Greeks. And we'll incorporate some of that into our practices. But I also want to mention minucha, which is rest, which is essentially the Jewish idea of minucha, and Shabbat is essentially a Jewish concept. So there'll be some of that included as well. Of course, oneg and kedusha, rejoicing in holiness, are part of Shabbat as well. But Shabbat is one of the primary Jewish ritual practices, and it can help in acquiring equanimity. So we'll focus on that a little bit later as well.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So I'm going through these materials for the first time as you're going through them, and is this idea of menuchat hanefesh, is that a phrase that comes from rabbinic sources, or is that something new?
It's a good question. It is a Musar translation of the word equanimity. It's a Musar midah.
Okay, so they use that phrase in the Musar literature, menuchat hanefesh. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And to me, it's really interesting because I think menuchat hanefesh is a little bit different than equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way I see equanimity, menuchat hanefesh, like, you know how you can go to the beach, but you can lay there, but if you're taking your problems with you, you're not having a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just the opposite of that. This is finding that vacation without going anywhere. And I think that's something that, I don't know whether students will understand it that way. Maybe they're a little bit less stressed. Well, they're differently stressed than we are. Mm-hmm. So just, and I guess a person's makeup, just what they're like, also has something to do with how they react to stress. But yeah, menuchat hanefesh is really equanimity of mind and soul.
Yeah, I actually stopped asking my students how they are. I ask them, how is your soul?
Really nice.
And I tend to ask them that because I want them to start really looking at inside, because it's not about how you feel per se, but you know how it all works together. So I want them to always look deeper. So I don't ask them how they are. I just ask them, how's your soul?
Are they able to answer that?
And they answer that. They do. You know, they go, oh, it takes them back, but they think about it, and they're, you know, mostly it's not the pat answer, because when you ask a kid how they are, they're fine.
Yep.
I'm okay. I'm good. You know, chit chat, whatever. No, you ask them how's their soul, and they stop. You stop them dead in their tracks, and actually think about it, and they answer you, or they ask, I don't know how to answer that question.
I thought, yeah.
Which is even better.
Right.
I like that because it is they are realizing that their soul is not something that's like in the corner of them. It's like right in the center. And when you make decisions of what you're going to do next, like how are you going to answer your friend? What plans are you going to make? What are you going to prioritize? If you think about your soul as being your central part, then you're going to make your decisions in a different way, I think.
And I let them know that they're actually all spiritual beings happening to be in this human body. And so let's treat ourselves that way, because we are divine. And if we are B'Tselem Elohim, then we should be looking at our soul all the time. And so, yeah, that's how I bring it to them.
I think that's awesome. So that's great. So, yeah, when I was reading about what are symptoms of not having equanimity, it was things like reacting too strongly to things, having trouble making decisions, being busy without accomplishing anything, looking always for ego gratification, worrying a lot, which I really, that's so me. But I think all these things are things that students also experience. And I think it's really great if we can make them realize this and find a way to look at it that's maybe a little bit different from what is popular right now in general. So looking at the themes, so equanimity is essential to the cultivation of a spiritual life, which relates directly to how's your soul. And it's translated as Menuchat HaNefesh, as we were talking about a little bit before, which is literally rest of the soul, which is, to me, different than just, you know, being easygoing. So, like I was saying, I found that a vacation's useless unless it's a vacation from worry. When you take the same concerns with you, it's just not the same. So, and I was thinking about that in terms of teens, and I think that while people who don't work with them might think, oh, wow, this is such an easy time, so much fun, I think they're very stressed. I think they're like super stressed. So much is expected of them. They're like wound up so tightly. I think it's important for us to realize this when we deal with it and how to go forward.
I mean, there's huge angst from these kids just because they're worried about what other people think of them. And I keep trying to tell them, what people think of you is none of your business. Stay out of it. It's a reflection of them. It's not you, you know? And it's really tough to get that idea across to the kids, you know, because that's their biggest worry, is how am I seen in the eyes of my peers? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing for my teachers? I actually told a kid the other day, I'm like, why, when you write a paper, are you writing it to regurgitate what you learned from your teacher so that she knows you learned it? Or are you actually writing the paper you want to write? And stop regurgitating and start writing. You know, you're going to teach teachers things if you actually open up and speak your soul. And we have to teach them that because nobody's giving them that permission.
Right. And they're figuring out who they are right now. And how do you learn that? By how it reflects back. I remember I was shopping with my daughter and her friend when they were teenagers, and her friend tried on these jeans and she said, do they look nice on me? And I said, Alana, it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you think. And she said, no, actually it matters what everybody else thinks. I think that's just where they are because they don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So it's important. What you say to your students is very important and getting that message across for sure. So it's good. The opening activity that I have here, I call it a stress test. And I think it's really important for them. Start by focusing them on times in their lives when equanimity is needed. Because it's going to make the text we study more relevant. It's going to help them focus on how they can achieve this balance. So give them each an index card and a pen, or they could do it on paper. Ask them to write down a stressful situation that they've recently experienced. I'm sure they can all think of one. Then, depending on your class, it's really nice if you can discuss it, because that makes them closer and helps them to handle their stress. So if it is, discuss it, go around the room and share. But either way, look at these questions that are on the screen and have them consider the answers either on their own or together. How did you deal with this experience? And do you think you got through it with equanimity? And why or why not? Because now they're thinking about what is equanimity? How do I achieve it? And why did I or why didn't I? So, and then, of course, the texts we're about to study are going to help them to do this next time.
Right.
So the first text, it's by Menachem Mendel Levin. A little background about him. He was born in the Ukraine. He had a traditional Jewish education, but also supplemented with science, math, and medieval philosophy. In the early 1780s, he lived in Berlin, where he met Moses Mendelssohn and other Haskalah leaders, which you probably know promoted rationalism. That was a rationalist. And liberalism and freedom of thought. So he was in favor of adding a general education to the standard Jewish education. That was a big deal in those days. And he was a fierce opponent of the Hasidic movement and of the Kabbalah because he was very rational. He viewed that as nonsense. And he lived until the mid-1820s. So that's a little bit about this guy. And what he said was, rise above events that are inconsequential, both bad and good, for they are not worth disturbing your equanimity. And that's from his book, Cheshbon HaNefesh, which means moral accounting. And it basically drew from classical sources, and it was like a step-by-step program for bettering yourself.
Do you have for this? Actually, this would be a question I would have for other texts as well. Do you have any sort of readily available link to the original Hebrew?
That is a great question. You know what? I bet I can, and I will send it in a follow-up email, because we can always go to Safaria, I imagine. I'm going to look it up, and I'm going to send it to you.
Thanks.
The only texts that have Hebrew in them in this Musar program are like biblical, like when we get to. So I think that's a great idea. A lot of our students aren't up to that, but some of them are, and they should be. So that's the second thing I'm sending the follow-up email. That and a link to Matt Barr. So I'm making myself a note. Perfect. Thanks for asking that.
Thank you.
All right. So, and actually in 1809, I think they published it again, or maybe that's when it was published the first time. And I think they added Hebrew, possibly. I'm not sure. But I know that his ideas were influenced by something he read in an autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which I think is.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember you talking about that.
Nice.
I think that's interesting. So we look at this. Rise above events that are inconsequential, both bad and good. But they're not worth disturbing your equanimity. So you might say to your students, look at what you wrote down. What kind of inconsequential events might be something you'd rise above? Were these things consequential or inconsequential? Because there are also things that should disturb you. Like, I think we send a message out to our kids that you're never supposed to be sad. Nothing's supposed to disturb you. If there's a problem, the problem's outside you and can be solved, you know? And really, I think that that's different than the reality of life. We're not all happy all the time. We should be happy all the time.
If you don't have service, how do you know what true happiness is?
And how do you trust yourself to ever solve anything if you never have to solve anything?
Right. And I like the fact that both good and bad. It's not just the bad inconsequential. Don't make too big of a thing when it's not that great of a thing. because then when something great comes along, you're not going to see its greatness.
Yeah. And we have to
I
have,
like both of those.
I think, perspective. We need to have perspective that we might not have so much in our present society, which is like manic.
Wasn't there like some sort of a pop psychology book that came out a couple of years ago called "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff"?
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
I know in my experience with the kids I've been teaching, there is no small stuff.
No, there isn't. That's just it. It's all big stuff.
Yeah. I think so. So it's, I think
It's deciphering what's inconsequential. Is having them figure out and actually utilize critical thinking, as to what it is that's right or wrong, and not bringing in societal ideas. Because like right now, when I was a kid, you didn't get a trophy just for showing up.
exactly
Everybody gets participation trophies. And I'm like, no, you either earned a trophy or you didn't. And you walked away and you felt either really good about it or really sad about it. And that sadness made you either work harder or made you find a different venue. Exactly. I mean, there are things that happen that consequences give us our next actions.
Exactly. And there's so little of that going on now.
Right.
I remember one of my kids said, when she was very young, like second grade, like whatever her teacher's name, I forgot her name, but she's always telling me I did a good job. She said, first of all, she compliments me for things anybody could do. And second of all, I'm not always doing a good job, and I know it. So they could see through it. And
right.
It did not make her feel good about herself. The thing that makes them feel good about themselves is if they overcome a problem. They use...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I just want to say many successful people will always say it's their mistakes that have made them successful. And I don't think kids understand that. That's how you grow and change. Mm-hmm. Bad things aren't necessarily bad. They could growth, they stimulate growth and change. And because if you do everything's always good all the time, there's no opportunity for growth. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
There'll be adults who don't know how to navigate life.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things to think about with the kids is look at yourself and assess your ability to rise above events that are inconsequential. You sweat the small stuff or not? How do you decide what is consequential? Mm-hmm. And think about that. And then the other thing I thought would be interesting is, do they think that experience helps a person to gain equanimity? Or does it make it harder to have equanimity, and why? Like, are you looking at all the things that can go wrong and worrying? Or are you looking at all the times things went wrong and you survived? So what do you think?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That could be an interesting conversation.
Like what did you learn from something that went wrong? I mean, that's, to me, is the simplest question.
I think it would be very nice for them to know that they can make mistakes. I don't think a lot of the kids I deal with know that they can make mistakes.
Yeah, what is that? Why are parents doing that? Because it's not the school. We encourage mistakes. I tell people, go out there, take chances, get messy. Mm-hmm. Miss Frizzle said it best. Yeah. Dude, take chances, get messy, make mistakes. It doesn't hurt. It actually helps. And I don't know where they're learning that they can't make a mistake.
I don't know.
Or they can't change their mind, or they can't, I don't understand that.
I think that's important. And I think that in terms of equanimity, to know that you can keep a balance no matter what happens. You don't need, things don't have to always be smooth for you.
Right.
That's the first text. I think it's important. And as we go through the text, so many of these texts, 3 of the 4, are from Musar masters, like the people who are really in the forefront of the Musar movement. And so I think that when we look at this, we can think about, this is a movement where you're thinking about your character, and this is building character. This is going to help them go on in their lives. So the next text, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy, Rav Simcha Zissel Ziv. He was born in Lithuania. He moved to Latvia. And when he moved, he changed his name. Actually, his father was from a famous rabbi family, which I'm going to probably pronounce wrong. Broad. I don't know. And he changed his name to Ziv, which was his mother's name. He was a big student of Yisrael Salanter, who was the founder of the Musar movement. And he was also an early leader. And he's best known as a founder of the Kelm Talmud Torah, which was a very famous yeshiva in Lithuania. You know, in the first, when we started talking about Musar, the idea was that from his yeshiva, Musar leaders wanted Torah learning to be applied to character. So they wouldn't just be learned people, they would be wise and compassionate. So that was his goal. And what he said was, what is the what is the foundational midah without which we can have a good character? He said it was equanimity. A person who has mastered peace of mind has gained everything. So I don't know, do you guys agree with this or disagree with this? You can do either.
Well, of course, I have to agree. I mean, a peace of mind means that you can look at everything with a holistic view. I mean, if you're always intrepid, you're always going to come from that perspective.
Very interesting.
It also means that you don't necessarily care what other people think about you. It's you yourself. You're the one that's mastered the peace of mind. It's not what about other people say about you or think about you.
Which is something we're trying to get them to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, is peace of mind something we can master, don't you? I'm thinking sometimes I have peace of mind depending on the situation, sometimes not so much. I'm not sure it's a constant, you know, I don't know. I don't think it's a constant that I've achieved it and now it's throughout my life I have it. I think it's something that can change.
I don't know if this is helpful, but what immediately came to mind from this quote is the fact that in the weekday Amidah, the first of the petitionary blessings are for like Bina Chochma and Deah, you know, and a sense of like not only wisdom but also like being able to apply past experiences to current situations. And I remember learning somewhere that that's the first of the petitionary blessings because you can't do anything else, you know, until you have that sense of, you know, sort of intellectual composure.
Very interesting. I love that. I'm glad we have this on this webinar so that we can all remember to go back and. So then that kind of leads me to, what is a definition of good character? What do we think it is? And what part does equanimity play in it? I'm sorry, I have a cough drop on my mouth.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah.
I want to keep talking. So although Musar masters might suggest different foundational virtues, and maybe our students want to see what they think, and they can look at their Midah cards and take out the ones that they think are foundational traits for good character and talk about that. And the other thing is, it talks about if you've mastered peace of mind, you've gained everything. What does that mean to the students? Like, what would gaining everything look like in your own life? I think it's a pretty challenging question. I'm not even sure how I would answer that. But I think it's something important to think about. Both because it gives you a roadmap of where you want to go, and because you just appreciate what you have. And it makes you gain some of the perspective I think equanimity is about. So that's my thought there.
Of course, that would change with age, too, I think. You know, what a teenager thinks of that, it's going to be different, I think. I don't know if anybody agrees with that or not.
I think because their experiences are different.
Yeah.
But like inside, I'm not sure how different we are as adults from how we were at, I mean, the teen years.
Honestly, I don't think I've changed that much philosophically. Once you've set your pattern and you know who you are, you know, and then you expand upon that. But there's that critical character traits that we all have, and I think they are established by our by the time we're teenagers.
In certain ways, I agree with you very much, but I think learning how to deal with certain things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Ellen,
It takes time.
they're younger, but I mean, that's
Mhm.
why it's such a good thing to study as they go through teen years, because they're figuring out who they are. I think also as adults, I think when I was like 16, 17, I really thought I knew who I was.
Hmm.
And I went on my way and, everything was good.
Mhm.
And I look back like maybe 5 years ago and went, what went wrong? And my little midlife crisis, not little. But now I'm on the other side of it because I'm old. So I think we are always at some point kind of looking at ourselves and trying to figure out if we are who we are and what we are doing right and wrong, kind of.
I think,
well,
I was going to say,
go on.
I like you, Nina. I feel like there was such a difference between my teen years and my early 20s. I'm a totally different person than when I was a teenager. I mean, I can't see that I had the same, the same mastery of, who I am.
Yeah, not that.
No, but just different philosophically and everything. So
I'm not
See,
really.
I don't know. I look at myself and I've always had the same character traits. I'm just expanding them and I'm tweaking them and I'm making them better. Compassion was really low on my character trait, but it's getting better as I get older because I wasn't raised by a compassionate single parent. I mean, there are certain things that we all, by the time we become a teenager, we've got some of these things that are automatically solidified in us on a cellular level that actually I'm at 51 now taking classes to break those down, the negative things that have been, that I've been harboring since I was a teenager or since I was 2 or 6 or something like that. We build these things within ourselves due to our societal the way that society treats us. So I think most of us, by the times that we are teens, we know the difference, of course, between right and wrong. That's why we can bar and bat mitzvah, and we are working on those character traits, whether we have them established or completely solidified. No, I don't think that's ever going to be, in fact, ever going to happen. We as human beings are malleable. We change all the time. So, but I do think that a lot is set at that time, and that hopefully we're encouraging it to be in a positive light.
Right, and an objective light. We have to have some perspective on ourselves and our situation, and I think that's one of the things that is so great about studying Musar with people this age, helping them to figure out what is important and, what's going on, kind of. So this is a great discussion. And the third text comes right on it and carries it one step further. This is by Alan Marinis. He's contemporary. He's from Canada. He's an anthropologist, a filmmaker. The thing he's known for most is that he founded the Musar Institute, which is in Vancouver. And this text is from Everyday Holiness, the Jewish Spiritual Path of Musar, which is a very practical set of teachings. I think a lot of Musar materials are kind of slated as practical ways of like self-help. But I see them as a lot deeper and spiritual and very important to the formation of a mensch. So this text says, tranquility doesn't spell the end of our spiritual struggles. It's the inner quality that equips us to handle them. And I think we've been discussing that all this time. But I think out in the world, a lot of people that are trying to sell Musar or sell other philosophical, spiritual, do so by saying there's something in it for you. You're going to get tranquility because everybody wants that. So I think it's important to look at it from that perspective also.
But his dog's not happy.
Dog.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Is that Bonnie?
Yeah, the dogs are excited. Somebody's on the street.
Gain some equanimity.
One side, go play. Okay, good. They're outside. Sorry.
Oh, that's great. Where are you? In the
I'm at home having
what
my
are you in?
in Syracuse. New York.
Syracuse. Oh,
Yeah.
Cold up
that's
there.
where I went to college.
Oh well.
Small town.
Long time ago.
Yeah, lots of snow. We
Yep,
we
I
always
remember
have
that.
Yeah.
Not here.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so when I look at this quote, I think it's a good jumping off point for asking the students, what unsettles you? What are the things that tend to unsettle you? Because if you know that, that's the first step to cultivating equanimity. And they can look at their Midah cards again and what Midot would be helpful to them when they are feeling unsettled. Because we know equanimity is managing things, but what's going to help you do that? And I think for every person that might be different. Because it depends what it is. Like I'm a big worrier. I worry much more probably than I should. So I would need a midah that would help me with that, probably some perspective. Other people might have other things that unsettle them. So it's good for them at this age and for us too to kind of think about what are those things and what other midot would help. So the midot that are most connected to equanimity are patience, which I could use more of, humility, gratitude, trust, deliberation, simplicity, and order. And if you're still putting your kids in charuta, it might be nice to have them sit together and think about what midot would be helpful to them. Discuss how they're connected to equanimity and see how they overlap and then come back and discuss it. See what one person think is connected, another person might think is not as connected. So you might want to take out the Midah cards and then share this idea.
And what I like about this text is that there is no end to our spiritual struggles. Kids have to understand that we will always be struggling because it's our nature, it's who we are, but that there's something inside of us that when these things come at us, do we handle them with this or do we handle them with this?
Right.
And, can we bring it in, feel it, sit with it, invite it to tea, do what we need to do in order that it doesn't keep coming like that anymore. Because things bombard us because we don't have those coping skills. So how do we gain those coping skills to deal with those things so that when they come, we don't feel like they're like this, but we feel like they're like this?
Right. I think one of them is not jumping to conclusions.
Which all kids do.
Right.
They have, did anybody remember the children's book, The Phantom Toll Booth?
Oh,
Yes, yes.
They literally jump to conclusions. It's a,
that's right. I haven't thought about that in such a long time.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
get that text.
Yeah, I'm thinking about
I think, what is it, Norton Juster was the writer? He was Jewish, right?
all the great writers, right?
This topic here is like essentially one of my favorite Rosh Hashanah spiels, because this is a couple of times I've used the image of was it Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness, and she's panicking, and then God opens her eyes and she sees the well, and a lot of the parsha, the Mefarshim on that basically say, well, the well was there all the time. It's the matter of having her eyes open to it. And I usually try to connect that with another one of my favorite holy texts, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Nice.
Where it has a big sign emblazoned on the cover that says "Don't panic."
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's really, really good.
Yeah.
It's excellent, right? And I think that there's something popular. What is it? There's a T-shirt I see all the time.
Keep calm and carry on.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. But what we're talking about is deeper. But that's a good place to start because everybody sees that T-shirt mug or whatever. So that is a very good thing. I love this discussion. It's so good. So going on to the next text, which is interesting to me because I'm not sure. I mean, I see the relationship, but it wasn't immediately apparent. It's from Exodus. It's when
This week's parsha.
But
It's this week's parsha.
Shemot.
I
Nice.
should really go to shul more often.
You go, girl.
So that's this week's Parsha. So if anybody's doing this topic, well, it will have not been far behind. And as you know, Pharaoh changes his mind. And then, what have we done that we have let Israel go from serving us? So it helps us focus on the importance of deliberation and decision making. We were saying how if you have equanimity, you can make a decision. But it's interesting because if you have equanimity, you can also not make a decision.
Correct.
The conclusions, take your time, figure it out. So commentators have used this passage to remind us of how important presence of mind is for our deliberations. And you can ask the students if they've changed their minds about a big decision the way Pharaoh did, and how did that work for them? At first, I wondered why this text was chosen to illustrate the concept of careful deliberation. So I'm interested to know what you guys think about this.
Yeah, it's an odd choice. I mean, because we seem to be implying, oh, it's too bad that Pharaoh didn't deliberate more and ultimately decide not to let the people go.
Right.
Mhm.
The one thing I thought about is that I guess everybody or most of our students, it's very much people know that this is something that happened. So it's a quick, easy example. And it might make it easier for students to think about their own decision making that way. What I thought about when I read it too was, do you think your decisions are more emotional or rational? Do you think this discussion of decision making is advocating one or the other, being emotional or being rational about your decision making? And why you would think that? I know a salesman who told me that every decision is emotional, and then you rationalize it. Like, I really want this item. I don't really have the money to buy it, but, and then you rationalize why you need it, or where the money's coming from, or some other reason that makes it worth doing, worth buying. So, and I kind of see that rationalization as an emotional thing. So the way I think of it is that decisions tend to be emotional, but I don't know what you guys think.
I agree. I do agree. I think the emotion leads to the rational part. Yep. So we make the decision at the end based on rationality, but it's really motivated by emotion.
That's how I see it. It'll be interesting to see what your students think. And it's also interesting, I think, when you're a teenager, to think about how you make decisions, because you're going to be making a lot of decisions going forward. They're kind of like at the bottom end of making decisions. They're only going to, so starting out with that knowledge of yourself and knowledge of how decisions are made, I think, is just a plus for all of them.
I think some people are just impulsive, and they don't. I guess that's emotional. Impulsive. They don't think anything. They don't think about it. They just say yes or no. I think the older you get, I mean, for myself, I'm very careful about making decisions, so much more so than when I was younger, because I like to research everything and have a lot of knowledge, when I do come to a final decision. And I think that what Pharaoh's saying here, he didn't deliberate enough, about it.
See, and I'm thinking of a conversation that kids were having in my car while I was taking them to Wednesday night school. And one was older than the other, and the other was going, what class should I take next year? And so they were talking about the teachers, the class, how much work there was. And this child is listening to all this, and he goes, oh, I think I'll take that class because it's easy. And the kid goes, well, it's easy to me. I don't know if it's going to be easy to you, but, and so I'm like, do kids really make decisions the same way we as adults do? Is it coming from an emotional thing? Or, I mean, that kid was sitting there, he wasn't thinking with his emotions,
No.
thinking with, I want the easiest class so that I can get an A and my GPA's up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was thinking. Now, maybe it might have been emotionally motivated because his parents will freak out if he doesn't have an A. Okay, maybe that's where the emotion comes in. But it's really interesting to see how their brains work, because when they're thinking through those decisions, I don't know if they actually are taking into account everything that's coming into those decisions, whether they're thinking rationally or, like you said, just impulsively.
Well, they're not using critical thinking at
Right.
this point.
And I don't think
Yeah.
we're teaching critical thinking.
No.
That's what I'm having a problem with people with their in regular schools.
Right.
Are you regurgitating what the teacher told you, or are you
Exactly.
reading something and loving it and then telling her what you see? That's what I want you to do
Right.
for you. Stop regurgitating what I'm teaching you. I know you get it. You're living it. You get it. Show me what you know. Teach me something.
I'm also interested in that, whether this kid thought about whether the class he was taking was a topic he was interested in.
Yeah, and it didn't even matter. He just wanted an A.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's
You
that,
know,
that's
I mean-
that perfection thing that
Exactly.
parents are, encouraging. It doesn't matter as long as you get the straight A's. It doesn't matter as long as you get into this college,
It is. It's so sad. And I would like to think that we, each of us in our little sphere, are not part of that. But you do get caught up in it. You really do.
Mhm.
It's hard. So, no matter, it's good to be aware of it, though.
Mhm.
It's important. We can't stamp it out, but we can help them deal with it. And hopefully they'll at least see another perspective.
Right. Right. True.
Yeah.
I mean, when a kid comes home with a C, I'd like to see the parent go, "Hey, what are we doing about it?" Not getting angry about it, but it's like, "Whoa, I had no idea you weren't up on this. Can we figure this out? Can I get you a tutor? Can I,
Yeah.
kids have enough stress. They don't need to come home to that. And, I'd like to see that change.
There has to be somewhere where they feel they can just rest.
Mhm. Yeah. So part of the things that we're doing here, I think, is trying to change that way of thinking.
Right. So then Rabbi Menachem Mendel Levin wrote in Cheshbon HaNefesh, he wrote, "One should carefully and calmly consider matters before speaking or acting." I think that's always a challenge. And they can look at how successful they are at doing this. And then when we go to the practices, which come up next, there's one that has to do with decision making. And here it is. It's a nice activity. It's called To Choose or Not to Choose. So it's a choice calculator. You can take it home. You can use it in school. Give enough time and space to decide the proper path. According to Rabbi Aaron of Carlin, be calm and deliberate before you do anything, whether in speech or action. This is an important principle. If you're in doubt, it's preferable not to do anything. I only know one person who does that. I swear, and it's not. And this is a pillar and foundation in the service of God. So I wonder how comfortable your students are with not doing anything rather than making a rash decision. One idea is in small groups, do a skit where you use a choice calculator to help make a decision, and then share the skit with the class. If you like, they can record their skits. If they want to put them on the Chai Mitzvah Teen Facebook page, that would be really awesome. And then, I wonder if you agree with Rabbi Aaron of Carlin that deliberation and decision making is a pillar and foundation in the service of God. Because it is certainly not something that comes naturally to a lot of people, I don't think. And why or why not would it be a pillar in the foundation? What is it about service of God that would make us see this deliberation in decision making? What is that? It's a concept that I think is very interesting to take and think about. If anybody would like to chime in here, I think that one thing is that people who do deliberate and are comfortable with making their decisions are certainly very I respect them. I think that in my decision making, I realize this about myself a lot of times. I just want to make everybody happy. I don't want to disturb anybody, you know? And I think people who are just comfortable with their decision makings because it's a good decision are certainly people who've reached a great level of comfort with themselves and have a very strong character. So that's something I think is important to discuss with the students and see how they feel about it, how comfortable they are, and what they base their decisions on.
I have to say, I think that's a good plan because our students are really overwhelmed sometimes with anxiety, and they don't get enough permission to deliberate, and everybody's on a time frame, so this is a very useful activity for them.
I think so too.
And I was going to mention a little something that was so weird to me. We were doing Musar last week, and one of the kids mentioned "on God," and I'm like, "What do you mean on God?" And it's now a new phrase that the kids are saying, like truth or word, and they're saying "on God," and I'm like, "Are you guys swearing on God?" You know, I mean, do you know what you're saying, and are you truly meaning when you say "on God"? So it really kind of took me back because I was kind of blown away that they're using that as like a hello goodbye almost.
So
you know,
Weird.
it's to me it seems like it's diminishing what it means. Word is much different than "on God." Word means, yeah, I trust that, I believe that. On God means that's bringing in the holy and the divine, and that is minimalizing what it really is. So
How is that different from, like, you know, in the Orthodox world, people just greeting people with like Baruch Hashem?
let's do Baruch Hashem all the time. Yeah, but when they say Baruch Hashem, I feel they feel it. There's a difference where a kid's just like, "on God."
I've never heard that
It's like
phrase.
a cliche phrase now. It's West Coast.
Huh.
Yeah. And, you know, I was just kind of blown away. I don't know what to do with it.
Do you think they mean it like Baruch Hashem, but they don't want to look like they mean it?
No.
They really don't mean it.
No, because it's kids who are not Jewish.
Mm.
You know, it's coming from my Jewish kids saying, yeah, these are, and I'm like, are these Jewish kids? No. Oh, God. I'm like, wow. You know, where's our society?
They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. And I'm like, so I'm like, how does that work in with our character and who we are? And, you know, when Judaism really actually says we don't swear on stuff, you know, we don't even say, let's do lunch if we don't intend it.
That's right.
You know, so it's,
Really
yeah.
interesting.
I'm hoping that they get this stuff, that it really gets deep inside of them and starts helping them build their character so that they can stop somebody and say, do you really mean it? Do you really think that calling in God right now is really what you're doing? You know, I'd love to see them call each other on that kind of stuff.
You know, when people say things like, and I was just talking about this to my husband last night, when somebody says, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. That is so disturbing to me when people say that.
It's psycho.
And people say it without, even adults, even in Judaism. I once had a religious school director say something like that to me. She's from another country, but I don't think she knew really what she was saying. It was very disturbing, and I pointed it out to her, and I think she was offended. I said, you know, I know your language, you know, of origin is not English, but it just is very strange that I hear kids saying that, but you know, I just pointed. I think she was offended, but I find it offensive when somebody says that. But it's such a habit, people say it because other people say it, you know.
Right, like words begin to take on different meanings.
Yeah, and she didn't think it had that strong of a meaning, obviously, and to me it did, and other people might not think so. But
it's interesting though, because we're talking about intention,
Mhm.
and being
Are you connected to your words? I've started asking
Good
people, is
question.
that really true?
Great question.
Just look them dead in the eye. Is that really true? And that's, because I'm tired of people not being connected to their words.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your intention? Is that really true? And even with the kids, but more so with adults, because kids are actually more connected to their words than adults are.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's really interesting. That's going to be a great discussion. I'm going to look forward to hearing what kind of answers you get, and if any activities change. Oops. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Where did my thing go?
Uh-oh.
Green.
Hi, Ollie. I apologize.
We've gone to the white place.
Now we got big faces.
Hi, everyone. We can see everyone at once.
Wait, here it is. Can you see it now or no?
See you.
Not yet.
No. See if I can make my screen share again.
Oh, you can.
I can do it. Here it is.
Green.
You can do it. There you go.
There. All right, we're back to normal. Okay.
Okay.
I think we went to the next. Good. Next one is something I wanted to get to also because it's about Shabbat, and I think that's important. This is so as a part of equanimity, we haven't spoken about so much, but having a day to rebalance, and of course that would be Shabbat. There are a lot of different ways to observe Shabbat, from traditional to more personal. I think you noticed that I didn't know what next week's parsha was, so. But I am not traditional. I don't go to synagogue every Shabbat. I use electricity. I drive in my car. But I never work on Shabbat, ever. And working for myself from home, I don't answer emails. And I always plan activities with family and friends. And I actually give myself a day for Menuchat HaNefesh. Like if I get a disturbing email, I give myself a break from it on Shabbat. Because I really need that day to establish equanimity.
That's right.
I don't know. For me, just going to synagogue, I don't find it to be spiritual. I find it to be more social. And living on a boat in the Hudson River, it's not always easy to do that. So I tend to have Shabbat in a different way. But that's something. Anybody want to share how they see Shabbat?
Mm-hmm. And what's really great about our synagogue is that what Doris has built in, I think, once a month where the kids actually lead the service.
That's really
so
nice.
We have really great, show rates for the kids, and it's another way for them when they can only see each other Wednesdays because a lot of them don't go to the same schools. They're all over Portland. So Wednesday night they finally get together and hash out stuff, and then when they go to shul together, then that's another opportunity for them to sit, have meals, talk, and after the service and during the service when they get to work together, that's creating so much camaraderie that it's actually a very positive thing. So I'm really glad that they've been able to make that happen for the kids.
I think that's great. I think, and it is important to be with friends on Shabbat, and if you can do it through the synagogue, that's even better. So this idea is Shabbat's a day to avoid what's stressful, focus on purely spiritual matters, and plan to spend Shabbat or part of Shabbat engaging in an activity that makes you feel calm. So what I'd like to do is give each kid an index card again or a piece of paper, have them write down an activity that they plan to do on Shabbat. Put it in a box or in a hat or whatever, and then count the votes. See which activities people plan to do, which activities are most popular, and what do you think is the reason for them? We learn from that first of all, what is a Shabbat activity? And second, and in not just in terms of like don't do anything that help build the Mishkan, but like in terms of, what is going to give you Menuchat HaNefesh? And I think that's a good way to look at it, and a good way to also bring Shabbat into reality. Any comments? Okay.
I'm reminded of the quote that I hear around here sometimes, like, the god of soccer is a vengeful god.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's great. So here's another one. I love this one, surf and stand. It's a midah meditation. So the goal of surfing is to stay on top of an inherently unstable wave and not fall off the board or get pulled under by the turbulence. And we can look at that as a representation of our lives. We want to practice equanimity and learn the ability to stay above the fray, stay focused on your ultimate goal without getting pulled up or diverted. And I spelled focused wrong, and I think of that. So sometimes an image or a body stance is helpful in cultivating a midah. So take the surfer image to say calm in two different ways. One, to build equanimity before you feel unsettled, and two, to calm down in response to a difficult situation. So stand with your feet slightly apart. Visualize yourself riding the surfboard. By the way, I used to do this on the subway when I commuted because it was just, you had to do it anyway. Shift your weight from one foot to the other. Pay attention to the balance as the waves shift. And practice this with your group and have them practice it at home every day for a month and see if they come back a little more balanced. I remember, let's see if I can do this. I'm either going to lose this again or it's going to be better.
There you go.
All right. So I think this is a really cool thing to do. First of all, because it's nice for the kids to get up and move. Second of all, sometimes when you are doing something physical, it helps you reinterpret something that you're trying to learn. So I think it would be fun to do this with your class and see what they think about it. Then, this is interesting too. Shabbat is social justice. So the Sabbath, which is a well-known work by Abraham Johnson Heschel, think about that as you list some of the ways of Shabbat to be a form of social justice. He said, there's a realm of time where the goal is not to have, but to be. Not to own, but to give. Not to control, but to share. Not to subdue, but to be in accord or agreement. And what are some actions they can take to bring this quote to life? So there's this worksheet, and as you can see, the students can list on each column the things they do during the week, like have, own, control, subdue, what activities would fit into those categories, and Shabbat acts, which would be inspired by the words be, give, share, agree. What would be the difference between what they do on these two different days, and how would they be different? Looks like you were about to say something. Oh, okay. So that's a thought that I think is important.
I find this a little vague. I mean, what sort of things did you have in mind?
That's a great question. Let's think about that. So the difference between having and being. So to me, having is like something physical you have, whereas being is something inside you that you are. So like maybe you would have, I'm trying to think.
I'm thinking like you have to go to school during the week, but you get to rest. You're being restful. So going to school, resting at home.
Can I speak? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I've been trying the whole time.
Oh, we can hear you great.
So one thing that strikes me about this chart is that the ones that are on the left side seem sort of negative. Subdue, control, whereas the Sabbath by Heschel is one of my very favorite books. And one of the things that I love about it, I was just talking about it last week actually, is that when he talks about Shabbat, he doesn't make it like Shabbat is good and the rest of the week is bad. When he talks about that, during the rest of the week we create, we build, we make things, and those are all really positive, good activities. And on Shabbat, we be, we just let it be. We have this sort of the taste of the world to come, like the way the world could be, but it's not yet. And so the rest of the week we still have work to do. So if I was going to do this, I would probably change some of these words.
interesting because they are from what Heschel actually said. But you're right about how you say it. So,
I mean, that particular quote does say that, but if you read the whole book, that's not the sentence.
Yeah, here.
Can't hear you now.
Hard to hear you now.
Can't hear me now.
Now we can hear you.
Okay. What am I supposed to do? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is there something that I need to do when I'm talking?
Right now, you're perfect. Whatever you did just now.
Okay. Anyway, I was just saying that in that particular quote, he does use those words, but in the rest of the book, I don't feel like that's the sort of thrust of the rest of the book.
That's really important because when we do this with students, we should explain that they don't have to be negative connotations.
Mm-hmm.
Having is not negative. Having is having.
Mm-hmm.
Owning is not negative either. It's okay to own things. In fact, owning your actions is kind of like having responsibility. So I think I'm really glad, Hannah, that you said this because we need to examine these words and put them in the right light. I think that's really, really important. Because as you said, I don't think Heschel meant it the way it
Right. It does sound a little bit meant it that way, but because and the fact that we're talking about Shabbat as social justice, when so I was doing a class last week on adult learning, and we were talking about Shabbat as actually being the time when if you're engaged in the work of social justice, you need Shabbat to sort of rejuvenate.
Can't hear you.
You go in and out.
I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That when you're doing the work of social justice, that you need Shabbat as this time to rejuvenate and sort of take care of yourself so you can go back out again. But in this, it sounds as if Shabbat is the social justice, and I'm not sure I'm entirely getting what that means.
That's a really good question. I think the idea is that the actions that you would take during Shabbat would be socially just. I think the interpretation of all these words is really, it's on the edge there, and it's not what you always expect. I think that people take actions when they're trying to accomplish or create. They're different than the actions they would actually do when they're being people, being mensches. Maybe they're not always doing those mensch-like acts during the week. And maybe it's a way of seeing how your actions differ. Doesn't mean that during the week you can't also be and give, I mean, I think it's a way of looking at your activities. You can agree, you can share. It doesn't have to be Shabbat. It could be Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a way of seeing how your actions are just and taking some of Shabbat with you as you go into the week.
Yeah, I still think if I was going to use this chart, I would probably change some of the words. And,
what would you change them to?
Well, I think on the left side, I would. Well, it would be a different thing because I see what you're saying. Like the way they using Shabbat as sort of a metaphor for doing good for people.
A metaphor for what? It's a little hard to hear you.
Do it as a metaphor for doing good for other people. It's just not the way to think about it. But I think I would have on one side, on the during the week side, I would have create.
Mm-hmm.
Do
What
things
would
like
you do after create?
Build.
Uh-huh.
Do action words. Like, that we're not supposed to do on Shabbat.
I want to put this in our follow-up email. I want to do this. I'm going to do this because I think it's worth it. Okay.
And then on Shabbat, I think I have things like reflect, learn, rest, things like that.
Very interesting. I really think it's important. All right, I'm gonna digest this a little bit, and I think I might make an alternate worksheet and send it out in the follow-up email. And if anybody wants to put into this, please do. Okay, because I think it's important. I think you have a good point there.
Thanks.
Okay, great additional information. The first one is a nice resource. Students can actively participate. And when they come together for the next class, you can see if they actually did this and they can tell how it felt. It's a Sabbath manifesto. It's a project based on the belief that in our busy lives, we no longer know how to take a break in order to recharge, which was what the biblical idea was behind Shabbat. So this site has suggestions to add calm to our lives. For example, the National Day of Unplugging, which would not make my life any more calm, I gotta say. Unplugging your devices once a week. If that seems like a stretch, try it for an hour. I was talking about this morning. I definitely don't answer work emails on Shabbat. I don't work. But I do play Scrabble on my phone. And, I FaceTime with my grandson. There's stuff I do. So I think it's important to think about it, have the kids think about it too. Look at this website. In what ways does it reflect what Shabbat is? In what way does it reflect recharging and gaining equanimity? What are the things that they need in order to do this? And I know people who do this, and it works great for them. Mm-hmm. And I completely understand that, and I think it's terrific. But I'm going to also tell you, from my point of view, it would kill me. So I think we have to have.
I've got my singing monsters I tap to make me relieve stress. So I get it. The Scrabble, I get it. Yeah.
So I think it's a great discussion and it's a great resource. And I have so much respect for people who can actually do it. I seriously do. I know, and it's a wonderful idea. So check it out.
I had a nice talk with my kids about unplugging on Shabbat, and most of them couldn't face it. It was too extreme. We talked about that if we lived in a little shtetl, in a circle together, and we wouldn't be afraid to unplug because the important people we knew would be right there.
Mm-hmm.
So our phones provide a lot of contact that we're afraid to let go of, and that's very understandable. But we thought of some other ways to unplug our heads and what might be helpful. It was a good compromise.
What were some of the ideas they came up with?
We decided that plugging your phone in, but leaving it in a different part of the house for a few amounts of time, or to schedule a family conference call every week on Shabbat. That was a very meaningful thing for some of the kids.
Very nice. And since I noticed that, like on holidays, when my whole family's there, I could leave my phone.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
I had a conversation with my husband just recently about the phone, because when I developed my Shabbat practice, I decided that I would use the phone so that exactly what you were just saying, because we don't live in a shtetl, and my sister lives in Israel, and my brother lives in Maryland, and whatever. But I wouldn't go on my computer, and I wouldn't go on email. But of course now our phones are all of those things. And it's really a slippery slope if you say that you are going to use your phone for phone calls. It's really hard not to slip into then going on the internet or going onto your email or all the other things that your phone can do. It makes it much more challenging.
I think Shabbat has to be inside us. However we can do that.
I love the fact that in order to unplug, you plug your phone in. I always think about that. Oh, it's time for me to unplug. So I plug that in. That gets plugged in and I get to unplug. And reminding the kids that let your phone die. Don't charge it on Friday, maybe. Just let your phone die and charge it back up Saturday night. Give it a shot. See how much you really do lose in one 24-hour day. Let's do one experiment and see if they can do it. I don't know.
I respect them. They could do it. Anyway.
I don't know if they'd want to do it, but
That's the question.
I think this is a good discussion because we're thinking of what is the core of Shabbat. What does that mean? What is recharging in terms of gaining equanimity? And you know, some of those things have to do with your phone. Some of those things have to do with the social interaction, which could happen anywhere. So it's an interesting thought. This next thing I thought is really interesting too. The Hebrew name Noach comes from the same root as menucha, which of course means rest. In the story of Noah, there's a verse about the dove going out from the ark and not finding rest, Manoach, which is also from menucha, for the sole of her foot. And we all know that the peace sign is a dove's footprint. Not finding a foothold because the waters from the flood have not yet receded. And the traditional Shabbat song, Yom Shabbaton, the chorus is loosely based on this verse, in which, however, the dove does find rest. So there's links to two different melodies for the song. You can see which they prefer. The first one, which I really like, is MIT students in 2012 doing it a cappella. It's really, I like it a lot. And the other one that there's a link to here is from Camp Ramon, the Berkshires kids. So I think it'd be interesting for the students to see these and think both about what Noach and the dove have to do with Menucha, and also to see if they like the song. So
what did you say the peace sign was? A footprint of a dove?
Here, I'll show you. Here's my paper, right?
Okay.
So when a dove walks on the sand,
it
leaves this, right?
Oh, how interesting.
Right?
Because the symbol for the warrior is an upside down peace sign for the runes. So I figured we got our peace sign as an upside down warrior symbol.
I've always heard of it.
I love the dove, though. I mean, that's so Jewish.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much more Jewish than, runes turned up, you know, this is the symbol for warrior and this is the symbol for peace. So
Right.
nice. I like the dove footprint.
Yes, I like that too. And I'm that's a story I've always had and believed in.
That's great. That's very Jewish.
Yes, I think we should go with that one.
I think so.
So that's it. So this is a very nice thing for your classes, and
Great.
I want to thank you before I do any Q&A that you might have. This was a great conversation. I think some great stuff came from it that I want to add to our follow-up email. So thank you for your input. It's like unbelievable. It's been really great. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Great stuff.
Okay, great. All right, then look for your follow-up email and thanks. And any questions about the Israel stipend or any of the other things, you know where to find me.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank
Just
you.
stay
Bye.
well. Stay
Thank
well.
you, Nina. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.